Okay. So can you read the connection after Shlok 15?
Yeah. The cycle of creation mentioned above systematically only when human beings discharge their essential obligations. Runs systematically only when human beings discharge their essential obligations. The harm accruing from non-observance of this rule is now explained.
Okay. So this is what I just shared. He's talking about the cycle of creation is the cycle of nature, and how if we don't fall into that cycle with doing our duty, we are breaking the entire cycle, and in effect creating harm towards the entire world. Evam pratitvam chakram
Evam pravartitam chakram
nanu vartayati hamyam. Sorry.
nan
Nanu vartayati hayam.
nanu vartaya tihayah
Yam.
yam.
Oh, yeah, sorry. You want to do this?
एवं प्रवृत्तितं चक्रम्
Evam pravrattitam chakram
नानुवर्तयतीह यः
nanu vartayatihayah
अघायुरीन्द्रियारामो
aghayurindriyaramu
मोघं पार्थ स जीवति.
mogham partha sajivati.
एवं means इस प्रकार, this way, in this way. Pravrittitam, prachalit, that what goes on, which is prevalent. Chakram, srishti chakra, the wheel of the world. Na is no. No, anuvartaya tiha. Anuvartaya tih means anukul, इसके अनुकूल नहीं बरतता. One who does not live or does not behave in accordance with this. अनुकूल नहीं बरतता, does not behave in accordance with. यह, वह, that person. Aghayu is papi manushya, a person who does sin. Aghayu. इंद्रियारामो, इंद्रियों के द्वारा भोगों में रमण करने वाला, engrossed in consumption through the senses. Mogham is vyarthi, wasted. Parth is Arjun. Sajivati, that person's life. He lives a wasteful life. Basically, this is what it means.
Shall I continue?
Yeah.
A person who fails to fulfill his obligations in this cycle of creation leads a wretched, sinful, and wasteful life. The contribution of man in the cycle of creation. Man has a significant contribution to make towards the cycle of creation. Circumstances and destiny impose certain duties on a man. If they are performed with a sense of dedication and without any expectation of material gains, the cycle of creation outlined above runs smoothly. A man who does not fulfill his obligations and is ever on the lookout for serving his narrow, selfish ends is said to be a wretch, and his sinful life is wasted in vain pursuit of sensual pleasures. This is why the scriptures prescribe performance of the 5 supreme yajnas. The unselfish performance of deeds for the common good has the same importance as yajna. The 5 supreme yajnas are briefly outlined.
So before we go to the supreme yagyas, right? So the first part of the shlok is really clear, where it says we have to do our duty. Every man, if you're born on this planet, you are given this opportunity to have a human form, Along with this comes a responsibility, comes your duty. And that dharma, that karma is true for every animal. Everything in nature, every animal in nature does their own dharma, does their own karma. The difference, and man too has that same karma and dharma. It's just that man also has the option of free will. And that free will can be used to connect our karma, our dharma with God, or we can just do it connecting it to sansar. And this unique gift that we have, he's saying, perform your duty, but perform it with yajna in mind, with an as an offering. Don't get ever involved as part of sansar, because then you go back into the momaya of the world. There is no bliss, there is no happiness there. Everything as part of sansar, just because of the nature of it, will be transient. So if you do experience happiness, sorrow will follow. If you do experience excitement, suffering will follow. There is no two way of it. And chasing only happiness, chasing only excitement is not possible. The only way to be ever in bliss is to connect with divine. So now he's saying, so now he talks about there are 5 supreme yagyas that we should be following. So let's read them.
The 5 supreme yagyas. First, Brahm Yagya or Rishi Yagya. Contemplation on the meaning of scriptures, meditation, chanting of the Lord's name, and similar disciplines which lift the mind from worldly thoughts and take it towards self realization signify Brahm Yagya.
So why is this important? Right? So why do we come to Gita class on Sundays? And why do we, like, it's now been 4 or 5 months for most of you, and you've been very committed and regular about coming to class, sending your recordings, shlok memorization, all of that. Why is that important? Anyone? So it's important. I mean, the way I see it, the reason why I love doing the class on Saturday and I love interacting with all of you Sunday is because it's even if my entire week has been tough, I have not had any time to do any swadhyay. I have not, my mind has been completely all over the place. I know that this structure will pull me back. It will take my intellect and connect me to what is important, even if I'm not ready. Right? So every week when we make that commitment, that's what Brahma Yagya is. That you're devoting that time and saying, boss, no, no, no. I'm going to spend that 1 hour or 90 minutes connecting my mind, my intellect to this capital S self, so that it gets a bit recharged. It remembers its real purpose. If we do these classes once in 6 months, chances are in 3 months in the middle, we've completely forgotten things. We're back to our instinct, we're back to chasing pleasures, we're back to suffering and happiness and the duality of nature. And then when we come back to class, we'll be like, oh yeah, but the real purpose is not this. Arey, why did I get so worked up about something so small? It wasn't worth it. ये सब तो game है. The real game is somewhere else. Right? That's what Brahma Yagya is. Is is the contemplation, it's the study, it's the time and effort we put to connect our intellect to the capital S self by reading the scriptures, by contemplating, by doing our swadhyay to internalize and understand these concepts deeper within ourselves.
So Brahma Yagya is like, it is the first one because it's like sharpening the pencil. When you can write with pencil as much as you want, but as you keep writing, that pencil will become blunt. And there's only to a certain extent that you can write with that pencil. To make sure that you're consistently able to write with that pencil properly, you must sharpen it at regular intervals. That is why, and if you don't sharpen, if you're not increasing your potential, then you will not go too far. That is why this is the most important, the first amongst all other yagyas. This is the yagya that will give you the energy. This is the yagya through which you connect to that universal energy that will make sure that all other yagyas get done properly. And what are the factors within this yagya? As Abhinav pointed out, attending this class is one of them. Swadhyaya is extremely important, very, very important. So, not just attend it once a week, it is not enough. It is just not enough. You have to do it once a day, at least every single day. That's why there is so much stress on Swadhyaya. And every class we talk about Swadhyaya. You have to, and there can be various forms of that Swadhyaya. Reading those two shlokas from Gita every day, reading other scriptures, doing your nam jap, or listening to bhajans, or doing nidhi dhyasan. Not just before nidhi dhyasan, doing manan. So Shravan is happening, but then there has to be manan on how you're applying it. So Brahma Yagya is the top one out there. We have to do it to be able to successfully deliver on the other four yagyas. You can't think that I will not do this, but I will do the other four. And if I'm doing the other four, then I'm fine. Because you just won't be able to do it beyond a point of time. At some point of time, you will start to falter across all four if this yagya is not given its due properly.
Continue.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Dev Yagya. This signifies mainly the fire ritual whereby offerings are made to gods with recitation of mantras.
Yeah. So Devi Yagya is at a gross level, when you think of it from a Havan perspective, it is that fire ritual where you make offerings. But as we understand now that when we say Deva at a subtler level, it is basically all the potentials around us that are helping us. These are various energies of God that help us in our lives, whether it is electricity in the common form, what we see, and we may say that, oh, electricity is, it's made by mankind. But actually, the potential that drives that electricity, the potential that gets us water into our houses, or the societal structures that we have set up around ourselves, all of those are, when you start to think about it at a subtler level, these are all energies of the Lord reflected in different ways. So, in a subtle way, giving back to society or giving back to the nature, this is Devi Yagya. So, whenever we are, even at a very small level, when you might have been involved with your alma maters, your colleges, your schools from where you've got all your education, giving back to that school, that is Devi Yagya. When you're participating, making sure, and that your yagya doesn't have to be, dev yagya doesn't have to be in the form of, oh, I'm going to do, like, I have to go on a beach cleaning spree, right? It starts with your own action first. What are you doing to make sure that you are consuming less plastic, or what are you doing in your own personal way to ensure that you're throwing garbage when you have to throw it in the right bin? It starts from that thing. Nothing has to go at a global or like a community level. It all starts with your personal level first. And every little act that you're doing, when you're walking out from the room, when you're switching off that light, that is devyagya. That is your contribution back to the community in your own small way. And all those small things add up. So that is devyagya.
So connecting back to the example that I shared earlier, right? But wishing somebody happy birthday. It's a small thing, but it's the bhav, it's the intent with which you do it that makes it a yagya activity, or it makes one of bondage. So out here, the deva yagya would be, you're in the message, you're saying happy birthday, you're blessing, but you're taking a moment to recognize, acknowledge the divinity within them, to tell them, hey, whatever you have to face, I hope you can face it with the right principle, with the right coverage, with the right courage, and the right bhav, right? You just need to say that once, but that's a offering of yajna. That you've made this offering to divine, that please give strength to this person to go through whatever they have to go through, and I bow down to the divinity, same divinity in you which exists in me. Right? That's another example of Deva Yajna. Yeah, Rishabh.
Atithi Yagya. Hospitality or service of guests whose visit is with or without prior information, and receiving the visitor with a welcoming smile, seating him with pleasure, and serving water to him, and above all, speaking sweetly to him, comprise Atithi Yagya.
Yeah. Again, this is at a gross level. It's obvious, Atithi Yagya. When somebody comes, we've got this concept of Atithi Devo Bhava. So if somebody is visiting our home, we treat them well, whether they come unannounced, instead of being upset about it, like, oh my God, like, why has this person come? I had so much work to do, and now I have to, take out time and stuff like that. What is the attitude with which the bhav with which you treat them? And here, like they've said, right, it is not just about receiving them with a welcoming smile or seating them with pleasure or serving water to them or food to them. More importantly, speaking sweetly to them, which means the bhav has to be correct in the first place. Now, this is at a gross level. What does Atithi Yagya mean at a subtler level? At a subtler level, Atithi is whatever comes unannounced in your life in form of any kind of VVGP. Vyakti, Vastu, Paristhiti, or Ghatna. Whatever happens in our life that comes announced or unannounced, when it comes into our life, how do we deal with it? Do we deal with it with the Yagya Bhav or not? Is Atithi Yagya. Right? So every VVGP that comes in our life, our response to them is that of Yagya Bhav, then we have performed this Yagya well. And as you can already see, Devi Yagya, Atithi Yagya, these Yagyas, the energy which will drive them comes from your Brahma Yagya.
So that's a really uh, interesting perspective to look at everything, right? Guest is not just a person who walks unannounced. Although even an unannounced guest in a Singaporean culture, all of us, like most of us live in Singapore, is very different. You cannot just walk into people's house in Singapore. You have to like give them, are you available? Are you free? Can we come? Do you want to come over? Right? But even I was brought up in a nuclear family in India. So वहाँ पे थोड़ा था, people would come unannounced and all of that. But if you go to my nani's house, if you go back to that generation, they lived this principle to the T. People would come at 10 p.m. at night and full dinner would be made for them, even though everyone's eaten and slept. Like all our families, I'm sure we've heard these stories, right? And never has there been a complaint. There's been a joy about sharing those experiences. And I remember when my Naniji passed away, that's the only stories that I kept hearing. Every time we went to every time we went to her house, कुछ ना कुछ पेट भर के निकलते थे. And she would talk to us and all of that. But Tuvina's extension of that concept is, imagine if we can treat every circumstance as a guest and as a guest of the divine, as that prasad from the divine, and how differently we would approach that same situation, and how small does our interest in that feel, right? You're just like, oh, this is also a prasad from Bhagwan. It's also a guest. It's also a part of him that is coming into my life. Whatever it is, can I treat him with love and with this sweet offering? This reminds me of a story. I think I may have shared this, but Gandhiji used to live in a ashram, right? I think it's Tolstoy farm in South Africa. And that entire farm, they had a very strict, as you can imagine, a practice of non-violence. So they weren't allowed to kill mosquitoes, they weren't allowed to kill ants. They had a very, very strict practice of non-violence. But the Tolstoy farm was also far away from the city. So there were lots of wild animals that sometimes came in. And there was a German guy, I forget his name, Richard something. He was a very, very famous German guy who who was devoted to Gandhiji. But that German fellow was petrified of snakes. And every day at 4 o'clock, they would wake up, they would do their prayer, they would do their bhajan, and then Gandhiji would talk about, they would read the Gita, in fact, and Gandhiji would talk about some principle or the other. But non-violence was seeped in as a concept. And uh, but this German fellow, let's call him Richard, I forget his real name. Uh, Richard kept saying, "Oh no, I'm petrified of snakes." He's just like Gandhiji basically told him, "No, you're not allowed to hit it, even if you see snakes." One day he went to a tool shed to get out his tools. So he walked in the shed. He picked up his tool, and there were two Russell Vipers that were there in the tool shed, and they came and they blocked his path from me moving the door, and they raised their head in an attacking position. Now, all of us know Russell Vipers are poisonous snakes, they're dangerous, you're not something to be meddled with. And his instinctive reaction was, oh, I have a spade in my hand, let me just whack them. But then he remembered Gandhiji's teaching because he was doing the class every day, right? And he's like, took a deep breath, he calmed down, and he said, whatever has made you has made me. So if both our makers are the same, then why do I need to fear you? Because you are Bhagwanji and I am Bhagwanji. And immediately because he changed his perspective, his entire energy calmed down. Within a couple of minutes, the Russell Vipers probably noticed he's not dangerous, so there's no point attacking him. And they basically slithered past him and they went outside the shed. Right? And that's just that story I read long time ago, but it's like imprinted in me that can you see everything as a connection with Bhagwanji, as his guest? And if you do, then you will operate and you will react very differently. Yeah, please go on.
I think we can also link it back to our previous learning of every situation being a blessing or a lesson. Right?
Absolutely. You will, and just to add to it, you will view every situation as a blessing or a lesson if you believe it comes from him now. The starting point of that is, yeah, it's coming from him. That's why it's a blessing and a lesson. It's not coming because this person doesn't like me, or my boss doesn't like me, or the universe is against me, or none of that. It's coming because from him as a blessing or a lesson.
Right. So, moving on, serial 4, Pitri Yagya. To feed self-realized persons and cater to their needs as a token of reverential sentiments for the ancestors is Pitri Yog, Pitri Yagya.
Pitri Yagya. Now, Pitri Yagya, again, as you would realize, all of these yagyas that we're talking of in Gita, they are also things that are universal in nature. And so you will see this reflected in some form or the other in every culture around the world. So in India, we have Pitri Yagya, we have a concept of taking care of our ancestors, our people who have passed away in our lineage. Similarly, we see the same thing in the Chinese, we see the same thing in Mexican culture, right? So that is the more obvious understanding of this.
Pitri means
Pitra
ancestors,
means,
right?
Yeah, Pitra means ancestors. Um, at a like if you create an extension of this, it basically means all those that we depend on or have depended on, whether it is in form of our gross for our gross existence or for our education. So Pitri Yagya would then involve all our teachers. They have given us a second birth by teaching us. It includes obviously all our direct ancestors, but it also includes every other person who is elder to us, who has in some form or the other has created the stuff for us that we have come to depend on today, right? So which basically means the ancestors of all human mankind. People who have, the person who created electricity has made our lives so comfortable today. They are worthy of our reverence. The people who fought the independence for India and created this land, the free land for us to live in, they are worthy of our yagya bhav, right? People who created the concept of equality in humankind, right? Whether they fought this in US or whether they fought this in South Africa or elsewhere, they are all worthy of our reverence. And that's how you need to expand your circle of pitra and expand your circle of consciousness of who you connect with and who you are, who you need to be grateful to, and who you must give your reverence to. So that's Pitra Yagya for us.
Continue. And last, Balevashwa Dev Yagya. To feed and give food grains and drinking water to animals like cows, dogs, and birds, which depend on human beings for their sustenance, is Balevashwa Dev Yagya.
Yeah. Now here, in the first one is who we all depend on. In the last yagya, it is everyone who depends on us, whether these are animals, whether these are people who are uh, weaker than us, whether these are our children who depend on us, taking care of them, having that yagya bhav to them, for that thankfulness that they have come into our lives to give us this opportunity of seva, whether these are our children, whether these are people of weaker section of society, if you're trying to, like, help marginalized parts of society, whether whoever it is, whoever, if somebody is hurt in a moment and you're trying to help them, that moment you are helping somebody who needs your help, right? That is Bali Veshya Devi Yagya.
So it's also important, I think, here to highlight that the reason why all of these things which we do on a daily basis is highlighted under the form of yagya is because we should do these acts as an offering to Bhagwanji. If we don't, it is very easy for our ego to get involved and make us seem, would delude us, make us feel we are more superior. So let's look at Brahma Yagya. You could read your scriptures, but then if you read your scriptures and you start looking at other people saying, "Hey, I'm better than you because I go to Gita class every Saturday," right? You're not. You've missed the purpose of doing it, and your ego is coming. The very last one, which is feeding animals or people who are less fortunate or people who are weaker, don't do it with the bhav that, oh, I'm superior to them, that's why I have to do it. Or I know more than you, that's why I can help you. Or I'm more successful because I'm smarter, that's why I'll give you some charity. No, it has to be done with the right yagya. Has to be done with the right offering. Otherwise, it's very easy for ego to come in and delude us as we are the ones doing it rather than him who is doing it through us. And this is just an opportunity for us to give that offering.
So another example, another important thing is when we say to feed, right? Or when we talk of food, food is not just grains that we eat, right? It is everything that we consume. So in form of gross material or in form of subtler stuff, entertainment or things we learn. Everything is food. Food for mind, food for emotions, food for our body. All of that is what we eat. So now imagine an interaction, right, between a teacher and a student. In that case, if both the parties are following the concept of a yagya bhav, then for the teacher, it is a Bali Vaishya Devi yagya being performed in the school, right? When they are taking care of the children, their students, and providing them whatever nourishment their minds and bodies need at that moment. And the bhav with which the students are partaking of that from their teachers is through the Pitra Yagya. So the treatment, the way they deal with each other and the way they consume or the way they give is of a completely different quality. So if everyone is doing it every now you will once you start understanding these yagyas, you will realize that every single interaction in your life every single relationship in your life will fall in one of these five yagyas. And it isn't as if like a certain relationship will forever be in that form, right? It can move across different types of yagyas as well. But it basically, these five yagyas will cover every aspect of your life. Everything you do from the time you wake up to the time you sleep will fall in one of these five components, in one of these five places. So the reason this has been performed this way is that essentially every waking moment of your life, every time you're breathing, everything that you're doing, you're thinking, is a form of yajna. And that, so our life has to be, it is. So we always talk about that, the four steps, right? We talk about shravan, which we do in the class. Then there is manan, when we are thinking about it and we are reflecting back on how to absorb this into our lives on a day-to-day basis. Then there's nididhyasana, the actual practice. And then finally, we lead, all of this, when we do it consistently, will lead to kirtan. Kirtan is when we are actually performing all these yagyas on a daily basis, every single moment. Then our life becomes a kirtan. It is a kirtan of the Lord through our actions, through our thoughts, through our behavior. That is what is real kirtan, and not sitting in a satsang and just singing songs or bhajans. This is the kirtan. We reach that kirtan when these five yagyas are being performed every moment of our lives. And again, not to sound like a broken record, it all starts from Brahma Yagya. So Swadhyaya is extremely important. 10-15 minutes of Swadhyaya. If you're not doing that, then coming to this class is a waste of time. As we always say, this is not a what's the word?
Pravachan.
It's not a pravachan, right? We are not here for a pravachan. If you are not doing swadhyay, then this becomes as good as a pravachan. And this is not a pravachan. We are not here to just listen, feel good. 1.5 hours, we felt really good about it, and we got energized and we walked back in our lives, right? Very, very important that we all take a moment to do our swadhyay every single day. It can be slightly different things every single day, but that connection to Lord through this sharpening the pencil is very important. Very, very important. Otherwise, 1 day, 2 day, the charge will last. Third day, it's gone. Right?
Okay.
Each of the above things and powers has a deep connection with the human life. A disregard for fulfillment of obligations towards them leads into a life of self indulgence only, and in this manner ruins human well being. This is why the life of such a person is termed a wretched, sinful life.
So here we have to always be conscious that the fact that we are alive, the fact that we are consuming what we are consuming, it isn't it isn't anything to do with us. Our sustenance today depends on the whole world around us. There are so many people who come together on a daily basis to bring us to for us to be able to enjoy our lives the way we are leading it. We don't create our food. We get it from grocery stores. There are so many people, such a huge supply chain to make sure that every single thing of that we need in our lives, just for food, by the way, comes to those grocery stores where we are able to buy it, whether it is milk or your different kinds of vegetables or fruits. So many people, millions of people have come together to put that on our plate. And then think about the supply chain that has gone into creating the homes in which we live in, or the government that regulates the world around us, or the food, the water, the electricity, right? If you start thinking about everything that we consume in our lives, the education system that we've been privy of, the number of people who have sacrificed in some form or the other to make it available to us, and you start to realize that our life is dependent on the entire web around us.
Yeah, I mean, a wrong amount of rain will result in crops not growing or the crops getting washed out, right? And even when we eat the food and it goes in our stomach, we don't digest our food. We have billions of bacteria that are doing the work there to help digest it, break it down, and put it into the right form for us to absorb in our body. We're doing very little. We're all being sustained because there are many, many paths that are working with the right yagya for us to function.
Yeah.
Now, whether we use this blessing as a way to contribute back to that cycle or take away from that cycle, that's our choice.
Yeah. And so we must always seek to give back in whatever form we can, and we get those opportunities now. You do not have to think about creating these opportunities at a national scale. Every single moment of your life that you're living, you have an opportunity to give back in some form or the other. And once we start to become aware of it, we will start to see how we're giving back to the society, or taking from the society, or nature, or the power potentials out there. So, and if for example, in our supply chain, one part of the supply chain decides to go on a strike, and what is the effect it creates. Similarly, if we do not give back to the society somewhere, if we just keep taking, we know how it works, right? End of the day, we are weakening the system that way. So being aware of how many people are, they are, how many people we need to be grateful for this life of convenience we are leading, and then being aware of how much I can give back is the state of mind that we should be in. A state of gratefulness and a state of giving, and taking every opportunity, every seva that comes our way to give back. That is the attitude with which we need to be living our life. So we'll do the connection.
Ask Daddy if he wants to read.
Papa, would you like to read?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Has difficulty with his eye.
Okay.
Right. Oh yeah. Sorry. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, sure. The above yatnas constitute essential duties for general welfare, but there is a highly superior class of people who have no expectation of any kind from anyone and who keep themselves absorbed in the beatitude of their soul. About them, the Lord says,
Yastatmaratirev syat
Yasvatmatratir eva syat
atmatriptascha manavah
atmatriptasha manavaha
atmanyev cha santushtah
atmanyeva cha santushta
tasya karyam na vidyate.
tasya karyam na vidyate.
यह जो who अस्त्व परंतु but आत्मा आत्मा में in self rati is happy or rejoice. Ev he only. Syat is who is. Atma triptascha manavah. Atma is self. Tript is satisfied. Tripti, satisfied. Cha is and. Manavah, man. Atmanyeva, Atma may he. In his own self only. Cha and. Santushtha, content. Tasya, to him. Karyam, actions or karm. Navidyate, he's not obligated to. He's not given, he's not obligated to.
Yeah. Please read.
But a person who rejoices in the self is perfectly satisfied in the self and is totally contented in the self. For such a person, there is no obligation to be fulfilled.
So, in this shloka, after talking about the various yagyas, he's talking about the Sankhya Yoga. He's talking about the person who does not seem to have any call of duty, because that person doesn't identify with his body at all. So we've talked about Sankhya Yogi a lot in chapter 2. But if I can break it down, right? Who are we? We are all bodies with a soul. As soon as the soul takes this body, the root of bondage is the material world, right? So the soul forgets that it's a soul, and it identifies with the body when the self and the body come together. Now, if you identify with the body, what happens? You start identifying with the cravings of the body. When you start identifying with the cravings of the body, what happens? You get completely seeped into sansar, into the world around you. And that's the and that's why we are people who are very entangled in the web of sansar. But a person who rejoices in the self, in the capital S self, is a person who's dissociated himself with his own body. So the principles or the yagyas or the laws of Veda do not apply to him. So just think of this as an example. In university, when you're a student, you have to follow the rules of university because you're a student. You have to show up for exams, you have to get 75% attendance, you have to do your projects, you have to do this because you're part of university. After you graduate from university, none of those rules apply to you anymore, right? Similarly, we as karma yogis, we are part of university. So these yagya principles apply to us. But for Sankhya yogis who've graduated from it, people who've fully identified with the capital S self, they may seem to not follow any of these principles. All right. And the reason why we're even learning about this will be clearer in a couple of shlokas, because these are people who could be perceived as role models. So you could look at a Sankhya yogi and he's like, oh, he's a self-realized person, but oh, he's detached from family. He doesn't take care of his parents. Oh, he doesn't really do any work. I live like him. And that's a huge delusion because our soul is not ready for that type of commitment. We are very different people. And that will be a slippery slope for us. So that's why he's making that distinction very clearly here, that this is how a Sankhya yogi operates. Recognize it, but for us, it is very important to do our duty. Okay, if you can read.
Self-contented person beyond the call of duty. Persons who answer to the description given in the shloka are all the time united with contemplation of the Supreme Consciousness. This is why they are content within themselves and have no expectation from anyone. The mind of such a person is beyond the reach of happiness or unhappiness. For themselves, they do not have any expectation from anyone. Whatever is done by them is for the general good. Such self-realized Such self-realized and perfect persons are extremely rare. For them, there are no obligations to fulfill and no duties to be performed. For they are beyond the command of even the Vedas. If such a person is not seen to be engaged in the performance of yajna in the shape of duties, it does not give license to others also to shirk their duties. In this shloka, the Lord clearly lays down that for such persons alone, there is no duty to be performed.
Again, here how, like Abhinav said, there are different ways, and how do you distinguish, right, between Sankhya yogis and Karma yogis? One of the ways that you can see is that in the material world, all of us who are seeped in material world, where do we get our rati or tripti or santushti from, whereas where do the Sankhya yogis get it from? So in the material world, we get the rati, the rejoice, the happinesses from our family and friends. Okay. Then we have tripti. Tripti comes from food for us, and santushti comes from wealth. Whereas for Sankhya yogis, rati, tripti, santushti, all of it comes from their own sense of self.
What is Rati?
Rati is rejoicing or happiness.
Rejoice.
Yeah. So it comes from the family and friends that we interact with. But they do not need anybody else to rejoice or be happy, and they are, you know, they are their own first satsang. right? And that's another important thing for us to recognize. How many of us are satsang for ourselves? How many of us will do the right thing when nobody else is watching us? Are we satsang for ourselves? Are we kusang for ourselves? How many of us start to, berate our own selves for doing something?
Judge
Right?
ourselves.
Judge ourselves. We're the worst judges for ourselves, right? We will judge ourselves, and then that gets reflected out in the world, because the people who judge themselves the worst will always judge others even more harshly. Right? So we judge ourselves and then we judge others. We berate ourselves, then we berate others. So are we being a satsang for ourselves, or are we being a kusang for ourselves? Are we happy and are we rejoicing in our own selves? Or do we constantly need a stimulation from outside, our family, our friends, to remain happy?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think this last point's really interesting and powerful, right? If in the coming week we can just become slightly more aware of our internal conversation about ourselves, it will reflect, it will give us some very deep insights about our own yearnings and cravings and perceptions, right? Like, do we constantly criticize people, right? In your mind, are you not, even if you don't verbalize it, in your mind, are you constantly saying, wo to aisa hai, ye to aisa hai? Or are you attracted towards negative news? Like during the Trump era, people would be attracted towards all the negative news, because when they read that negativity in their mind, they're like, oh, I'm so much better than him. So it makes you feel good about yourself. Just being slightly more aware of that internal chatter would be a very powerful exercise. Yeah. We have time to do one more, right? Should we get...
Smita, will you read?
Sure. Connection. The Lord further speaks about such rare persons and says,
Naivatasya kratenartho
Neva tasya kritenartho
na krateneha kaschana
nargate neha kaschana
na chasya sarvabhuteshu
na chasya sarvabhuteshu
कश्चिदर्थ व्यपाश्रयः.
kaschidartha vyapashrayah.
Naiv is not only. Tasya, such great people. Kratenartho, kraten is through action. Arth, interest, prayojan. What is the ultimate interest towards which you are doing something? Na, no. Kratene, karma karne se, doing some action. Kaschan is koi. So, na akrateneha. Akrateneha. So, first one is kraten is actually doing an action. In the next word, it is akrateneha, not doing an action. So, you're basically, when you read it, you will realize that it's like that these people, they do not have any interest in, such whether an action is being done or an action is not being done. Okay, that's the meaning of the sentence. Na, no, cha is and, asya, his, iska, sarva bhuteshu, all beings, kaschit, even a little bit, artha vyapashrayah, स्वार्थ का संबंध नहीं रहता. When they deal with other people, they are not dealing with them on the basis of any self consideration, any self benefit.
Okay. For such a person, there is no interest in whatever is done or is not done, nor are his relations with any being based on considerations of any self benefit. Absence of self interest in a self realized person. As has been explained earlier, for such rare saints, there is no real existence of even their bodies. Totally devoid of sense of living in the phenomenal world, for them, the ephemeral world is like a dream. Unaffected by the phenomena of birth and death, they live in an eternal life. Therefore, their relations with persons of the world are not based on considerations of self-interest or obligations.
I mean, this is very clear explanation, but it's also so unrelatable to all of us, right? Because we are seeped in sansar, in body consciousness. We can't imagine what you, treating this world like a dream, like very different concept, right? But that's who they are. They're born with a different journey, and they're very different souls, and we have to recognize them for that. Uh, Anu, would you like to read the connection? Anu, you there? Anupama, can you hear us?
I thought you were calling someone else.
I'm sorry.
No, sorry.
Can you read the connection, please?
Yeah. Summing up this subject, the Lord says,
तस्माद् सक्तः सततम्
Tasmadastatatmam
कार्यं कर्म समाचर
Karya Karma Samachara
असक्तो ह्यचरन् कर्म
Asyakto Hir Charan Karma
कर्माप्नोति पुरुषः
Parmapnoti Purusha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tasmat is therefore asaktaha, without attachment. Satatam, always. Karyam, duty, action, karma, kartavya. So karyam karma is kartavya karma, dutiful action. Samachara, keep doing. Asakto, without attachment. Here, he, kyunki, because. Acharan karma, karta hua, karma, action. Paramapnoti purushaha, such a person reaches the state of self-perfection. Param apnoti purushaha. He reaches that ultimate state of self-perfection.
Therefore, caring not for accrual of any gains or losses, engage yourself in the assiduous performance of your duties. For such an unattached person reaches a state of supreme self-perfection. Selfless action, key to self-realization. In this shloka, the Lord reiterates that a man should perform his duties assiduously. In doing so, the expectation of pleasure should be abjured. Instead, the opportunity to perform one's duty should be considered a great favor from God. For Almighty God, it is not difficult to get anything done. It is His grace that He provides an opportunity to human beings for performance of duties in an unattached manner. Thereby, He provides a chance for the salvation of the performer, emphasizing salvation of the performer. Emphasizing this, the Lord says that performance of duties without self-interest enables one to realize God in this very life. Giving examples,
So in this shloka, in the previous shloka, he made it very, the way it was explained, he made it very unrelatable for us. That we're not this person for sure. And if we're not this person, if that's not how we viewed life so far, that means you have duties to perform. You cannot escape your duties. So if you have to do duty, do it without caring for gain or loss. And because we all have duties, this particular line, right? It is His grace that He provides an opportunity to human beings, to us, to perform duties in an unattached manner. We can either do the duty in an attached manner and then go back into this cycle of birth and life, or we have the choice of doing it in an unattached manner and kill our own prarabdha, our past baggage that we're carrying forth. He also says in this shloka, the entire thing we've talked about earlier, is if you don't do your duty, that act that is supposed to happen will happen. But you would have just lost an opportunity to do your duty in a way that kills your prarabdha. We all are born. So for the new people, in chapter 2, we talked a lot about this, but we all are given this life and we all are born because we have to pay uh, we have to pay for the consequences of our previous actions. That word is called prarabdha. Those consequences will show up in this life. And because of those consequences of action, the only way to pay it is by us doing the duty correctly in this life. If we do our duty in an unattached manner, we get rid of our prarabdha and then we go back to our original self, which is being one with the Lord, which is the ever ocean of bliss, Sat Chit Anand. Okay? So out here he's saying that if you don't do your duty, it's only your opportunity lost to come back to me, because that act will still happen. And I'll give you an example, right? Like if I am Tuina and it's my duty. I've given this example earlier, but it's my duty to like take Vedant to school, my son to school. If I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm just I don't want to do it, and I don't do my duty, my part of the role, that piece will still happen. Tuna will step up and she'll be like, fine, I'll go drop the son off. What and my son will still somehow reach school, whether it's Tuna, whether it's helper, whether we'll call somebody else, we'll arrange a taxi. There are a million other things will happen if I don't get involved, right? So that act of him going to school has still happened. It's just that I have now collected more consequence because I've not done my duty, or I've not done my duty in the right manner. And that's the beauty of uh, this way of life. Every act, every opportunity of duty that comes, it is our right to do it, and it's a prasad from him to do it. So that we do it as an offering to him, and we're getting rid of our own prarabdha, are these consequences that we have to face. Right? Sorry, you were saying something.
Yeah, and when we are doing our duties, when we do it with the right yajna bhav, then we'll realize that our consciousness necessarily will change from that of taking to giving. And that's very, very important. So we have to change this consciousness, our energy to how do we help others? How do we contribute back to the world? How do we give rather than we take? Right? Always give first and then take if at all, because take तो हो ही जाता है वो तो without even realizing, just as a matter of living, we are constantly taking.
Yeah.
So we have to now focus our consciousness on giving.
So much of what we've already received in our lives, and which has allowed us this opportunity to sit here, read the Gita together as part of this group. So much of what we've received, most of us sit back and think, I was so lucky to get it. And some of us even think, oh, maybe I never deserved it. I didn't work that hard to do all this. I was just so lucky that I was born in the right family. I was so lucky that my house was so close to such a good school, which had a particular teacher that made me fall in love with the subject. All of this is just his blessing that has allowed us to continue in this journey, right? And the key for us to move forward is to continue acting selflessly, because whatever we are going to get in our life, he's going to make it available to us. That's going to happen, just like all of this has happened with us sitting here reading the Gita in Singapore or wherever we are in comfortable homes. That has happened. And everything that's going to happen in the world, in our lives, is going to happen. The only choice we have is, can we act with yajna? Can we act with without a selfish motive, with lok sangra, which is doing things to strengthen the system? And if we do, then self-realization will be on our doorstep. And self-realization, just for the new people, is not something to attain after life. is to attain in this life. The previous two shlokas is what self-realization is, where you're so stable in capital S self, in your soul's expression, that nothing in this world bothers you, and you're in ever state of bliss and happiness. Right? That's what self-realization. Moksha is there in this life, in this world, not after death. And that's what we strive towards. Yeah, I just wanted to stress on that point a little bit. Should we stop here? The next stroke is about leadership, and I think we should spend a bit more time talking about it because it will be relevant for us.
Yeah, it's 6 minutes. We can do it. Maybe.
Yeah, you want to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Rituj, would you like to read? Do you have the book? Okay. So if you can read the connection, please.
Connection. Giving example of such persons, the Lord says,
Karmanyevi sansiddhim
Karmanevi sansiddhim
asthita janakadayah
astita janakadayaha
lokasangrahamevapi
lokasangrahamevapi
sampashyan kartumarhasi.
sampashyan kartam maharsi.
कर्मण्येव ही कर्म के द्वारा ही through the action alone samsiddhim param siddhi perfection asthita प्राप्त हुआ obtained जनकादयः जनक आदि लोगों को people like Janak is the name of one of the greatest kings of India. लोक संग्रह मेवापि लोक संग्रह के लिए for the welfare of others. Sampashya देखते हुए, by seeing, by observing and following. Kartum करने के लिए, to do so. Arhasi योग्य है, is capable, is capable, yeah, and you should, like that.
For Janak and others attained liberation by engaging in actions, you too ought to perform your duties to set an example for the general good.
So here it's interesting to observe that leaders are people who we tend to follow, or they inspire action from a nation, right? When that leader is stemmed with the wrong principles, that leads to the whole system justifying those very same actions, right? You can look this at a micro level, you can look this at a macro level. At a micro level, if I consistently lie and steal and pick up things from like restaurants and put it in my pocket, my son's going to do it. There is no question about it that my son will not copy me, right? And if he does, I have no authority to correct him because he's just copying me. And at a macro level, if you look at nations, the person who leads a nation sets the moral compass for that nation, right? And we've seen that with Hitler as a very, very bad example, that he made it okay, or a person like Trump who made it okay for people to be racist, made it okay for people to be divisive. We've also seen very good examples where a Gandhi or a Mandela have brought two people together despite their bodily cravings being otherwise. Gandhi convinced 350 million people to be slapped but not slapped back because he was so deeply stemmed in the right principles. And what Bhagwanji is saying is we all are leaders. We all have this opportunity to be a leader, to represent and live with the right principles, because that will set the example to everybody else. So many times people in the Gita journey come and say, hey, you know what? This brother of mine really needs the Gita, man. He's just like really unhappy. He's constantly fighting with his wife. All of those things. How do I get him in? How do I give him Gyan? And I remember I asked this question to a Sankhya Yogi who'd come to Singapore about 4 years ago, and I was sitting in the taxi with him, in a car with him. And he looked and he said, Abhinav, um, your job is not to enroll them. Your job is to live these principles. If you live them if you live them with enthusiasm, and if you're actually living them, the whole world's problems will come to your feet, because they will want a piece of you. And when they come to you for a piece of you, when they come to you saying, please help me, you seem sorted, I don't know how to do this, you will say, boss, I am not doing anything, this is the book. Aap padho. Right? That was his advice to me 5-6 years ago. But this is exactly what the shloka says as well.
There's another important thing in the shloka, right? By giving an example of King Janak. King Janak is one of the most well-known kings in the history of India. He was considered extremely he was so well learned that even the sages used to come and seek his advice. Okay, and who was King Janak? King Janak was Sita's father. He was the he was constantly involved in management of affairs, right? He was the king of a very large nation. So imagine that person is constantly doing duties, taking difficult decisions, right? So he is you and me, engaged constantly. He's not somebody sitting very far off in some on a mountain top. He was practicing Gita in an everyday by performing his duties as a king of the state, right? Fully doing all the duties that you and me have to go through, have to take difficult decisions, manage different expectations, and still be able to perform his duties to such perfection that even sages used to come and seek his advice and not the other way around. So, if he can do it, he sets an example for all of us of what we should be going in for, that we can do it too and attain that state that King Janak was able to. And we should be doing it because as a part of what we are, as we are living our lives, we set examples to people around us, and that's the only way to teach. Apply Gita to ourselves, and with the divinity as it starts to come out of us, as it radiates from us, that radiation will change our environment. And that's the way to change environment. It's not the way to like, oh, you should go to Gita, or you should do this, or you should do that. No, we live our life, and through our own actions other people will get drawn to us, and then they will bring about change. So we are all agents of change, but that agents of change is not through words but through our own actions, and by changing, bringing about that change in ourselves. As is inside, so is outside. So as we change inside, our outside will change as well. Our environments will change, our relationships will change.
Yeah, if you can just finish reading, Rituj.
Example to others. The best example of selfless action is provided by the life of King Janak. Even though he assiduously involved himself with management of affairs of the state, he attained a high position in the eyes of even perfected sages by his selfless actions. So much so that even saints of eminence used to look up to him for guidance. He used to manage important affairs for the state, regardless of personal comfort. Compared to arduous duties of governance discharged by Raja Janak, the performance of ordinary duties of everyday life provides a far easier and comfortable opportunity to a person to attain the highest perfection. Another reason for selfless action is said by the Lord to be that Others would also be encouraged to act likewise and perform duties religiously. Thus, from one such person, another person can get the inspiration to attain the highest gain of human life.
Yeah. Great. All right. We're ending 4 minutes late. We also started 4 minutes late, but I apologize for that. We can do the closing shlokas. Om Sarvesham Swastirbhavatu Sarvesham Shantirbhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukha Bhag Bhavet Om Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you all.
Narayan, Narayan. Thank you for joining the class.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.